Hi there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. This is the monthly show where we take two creative people and have them talk about what makes them tick, how they got into this field, and where they got that creative juices flowing. Yeah, that word creative feels really good about right now. This month, we are doing storytelling. And storytelling is a great thing. We're not talking authors, we're not talking writing, we're talking performing and doing storytelling. And we've got two really fun ones here today. Carrie Sue, welcome aboard. How are you today?
I'm awesome. So happy to be here.
And we have Jerry G from up in Atlanta area coming with us. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you both very much for being here today. So, what I'd like you to do, Jerry, you start off and tell us, give us your basic bio. What is it about being a storyteller for you?
Oh, that's easy. Well, the storytelling part comes from me being a percussionist. So my mantra is bring the words to life. And so every time that I tell a story, there's always percussion instruments involved in it as well. So that kind of gets the audience, be it, boys, families together to come up and play the instruments as well. So bring the words to life through percussion. So I'm like the griots from Africa, which use music, songs, etc. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's a great tradition to follow along. And how about you, Carrie Sue?
Yo me llamo Carisu. My name is Carisu. Y puedo trabar la lengua en 12 idiomas. And I can get tongue-tied in at least 2 languages, sometimes more. And I tell stories in both English and Spanish, though I originally started with the Jewish tradition, which are the stories I grew up listening to. And I learned to tell stories en esta misma casa, in this very house, the house that my grandparents built. And it's interesting, like Jerry was talking about the rhythm, because he does it all through that too. And I discovered everything we do when we're creating and making those stories come alive has a rhythm to it. And I just do it by adding in other languages sometimes.
That is awesome. So I want you guys, and Carrie, we're happy you start off. Tell us about how did you first get into this portion of being creative? And I normally at this point say, oh, was it that you were storytelling or something when you were a little kid and this is how you got into being creative in other ways? What is it that got you into storytelling about doing this as what you wanted to like make come alive?
It's interesting when I look back on it in hindsight, I see the signs have been there all my life. I've always loved stories. I've loved listening to stories and collecting people's stories. So when I look back on it, going, oh my God, even as a young child, and I learned to tell stories. I learned to listen to stories, first of all, and be interested in, and that's part of it, the creative thing. And adding the second language, also in hindsight, I used to make up another language. My brother and I, who were not twins, but we had several twin syndromes very similar. He's only a year older than me. In fact, he told everybody for years that we really were twins, but that I was held back a year in school. I went, wait a minute, you couldn't just say you skipped a year. No, no, no. But we had our own language, and I remember playing with rhythm and sound and languages to create stories. And I was lucky. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but spent every summer in South Florida in this very house that my grandparents built. And they were both storytellers. So every night my grandmother would say, where would you like to go tonight? She would take us around the world. I thought because she spoke several languages, she really had been all around the world. No, I just found out when we were at camp, she would go to the library and check out folk tales and tell us stories from around the world. Whereas my
We like that with the
grandfather,
library there. That's a nice
yeah, it
touch.
was a
Thanks.
big connection for me. And I still love the library. It's always been my safe place. When we go to libraries, no matter where we go, there's something familiar about the setup. So it's like you can go far away from home and go into another library, and I do, and feel, oh, even though I've never been here before, I'm comfortable with it. My grandfather was a Talmudic scholar. Um, Both my parents were born in the US, but none of my grandparents. And he would tell stories throughout the day to myself, to my siblings, to the neighborhood kids, and to all the adults that were there. There was always some kind of story. So that's how I learned everything. I learned how to navigate the world through story. And so that creativity came along with it because I also heard that stories were always un poquito diferente, always a little bit different, depending who was telling them and when they were telling them and what everything else was going around about them.
How about you, Jerry?
All right.
You feed
Yeah,
off of that. Tell us how'd you grow up into storytelling?
well, it's one of those situations whereby I also took in the creativeness of being an actor as well. So with an actor, you have your script. So as a storyteller, you tend to do more things individually by yourself, and that's where I began to add in like I said, the percussion as an individual performer, and that gives a more opportunity for the audience to be totally breaking down that fourth wall to get on stage with me as well. So it's whole acting, singing, dancing, etc. So I've always knew that I had stories in my mind, and I always knew that I wanted to tell stories. And the only way to do that is to be a storyteller. And that way I can be my animated self. Because sitting right here, right now, I'm having my hands clasped, so I won't move around as much.
Oh, I do all the time. Yeah.
So trust me, I talk with my hands as well as my whole body. So I hope I'm doing justice, so everybody can hear that my voice may be animated, but my body is still frozen as all get out. But
Oh, you don't have to be frozen. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. But you know that old phrase, everyone has a story. So everyone has a story, and there's always stories to tell. So just get out there and do it, and just have fun with it.
So tell me, Jerry, where do you and just jump right in, Carrie, as you feel. Where's the difference in between performing and storytelling, or what's the subtle differences in between the two?
Subtle difference is that as a storyteller and performer, a storyteller, you're always in tune with all the characters at the same time. And then the performer, you have to be able to take those characters and bring them out with their own personalities one by one, or sometimes together. So you have to really have that out-of-body experience as you're telling the story as a performer. Does that make sense, Carrie? Do you follow me?
I agree 100% because we have to be aware of everything going on, and we're not just giving it out because we're taking in at the same moment. We're so aware of the audience, about everything that's going on in the stories. My mother always used to say, you must be present to win, and you really have to be present as a storyteller because it's always changing. You may use some of the same phrases and sometimes the same wording, but it's never exactly the same because you're present in that moment and your listeners are different and you might be different, and you'll see the stories will sometimes even surprise us in the moment that we're sharing that. So it's a performance, but there is no fourth wall, like Jerry was saying earlier. You're not just giving it out, you're in that moment with it. It's part of what I love. Always on your feet, you never know what's going to happen, but it also gives us the flexibility to improv at that moment, no matter what might happen. If a train goes by, or there's something falls down, or there's a snake on stage, all of these things have happened.
Right. Yeah, because it's the Stanislavski, the what if, what, and the subtext. So you have the what if this happens, what if this happens to that character, and then you have to, if you hear a pop or a child coughs, you're able to add that within the story by, like I said, having that out-of-body experience. So we tend to enjoy it as we're telling it. We know beginning, middle, of end, but it allows us the opportunity to be right there in the moment as well as the audience member who's telling the story, who's performing the story.
That's exactly right. And like Jerry gets everybody in with the rhythms and the drumming perhaps, and we do that anyways in our stories because our audiences are part of it. For storytelling to happen, you need, I think, three things. Well, number one, you have to have a story. You have to have somebody telling it, but you also have to have that last listener. Without that, you're just talking to yourself. It's not the same thing. It's a really active moment. And you're right, Jerry. I find it a lot of fun. We both love it. As we're doing it, though we may never know exactly what's going to come out. It's always a little bit different. When I add, like you add rhythm and drumming to it, I add sometimes different languages. It depends. It's never quite the same because I tell stories all in English. I tell it all in Spanish. I often tell it combined, so it includes everybody, never excluding, even if you don't speak a word of the other language. So the amount may change, and what I say and how I say it may change, but it's the same story. My grandfather, the one I was talking about earlier, who really was, to me, the epitome of what a storyteller should be. He was a great listener. He's also the one that taught me, if you don't know the trees, you may get lost in the forest. It's an old proverb. But if you don't know the stories, you can get lost in life. And he was always, he never told me what I was supposed to learn from the story. That might have been different than what he intended, but there was always something that I was taking away from it, even if it was just laughter. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, because also with my thought process is as though as a storyteller and performer, you're always thinking from the thought process of being a picture book author. So, or an illustrator. So you have these pictures, so you tend to want to, like I said, bring those words to life. And even if it's a nonfiction or fiction book with just words, you still have to have that visual element as the storyteller and performer. And, that's because I turned that into how I basically wrote my book, Nancy and the Colorful Kente Cloth. I was able to bring the characters to life, make sure that it had the illustrations, but also just enough words to carry it through so that if a parent is reading it to a child, the story can still be prevalent as well.
Let me hook into that one there for you guys and ask, I like what you were saying, Carrie, about you need all three things. You need the story, the person, and someone to listen. Over the last couple of years with this pandemic, you've both been able to survive and still put forth good stories. How did that change for you, or how was that adjustment in both your mind? I'm more important about what your mind was, and I'll get to ideas of how you actually physically make it happen. But telling those stories in an online format when you can't have the person in front of you anymore.
Wow. Well, for me, it's like two things. I was fortunate enough that I was able to be able to go to a spot to do the virtual recordings, so that helped. But once again, we always have to be aware of the audience, because like I said, no child left behind. If there's one person in the audience, you got to give it your all. So that's my thought process. Like, we love when we have 80 kids or 50 kids and 50 adults, but if there's one person there, give them your all. I'm sure Carrie will agree that, a story is meant to be told, and you don't try to downplay the story because there's only one person there. Give it the same beginning, middle, and end, and feeling as if there was a whole crowd of people filling up Mercedes-Benz Stadium, so we say.
I feel exactly the same way. Whether it's one listener or 1,000 listeners, we're still telling to that audience, to those listeners. And it's interesting because something that Jerry said earlier is, I once had I remember it was a third grade boy come up to me and say, "Thank you for painting those pictures in my mind." And I think for me, that's exactly what I do. We're artists, but we're not necessarily painters, but we can be visual artists because we're painting those pictures in your mind, but we're using the art of storytelling. And for me, I was lucky. Years ago, I did a television show on storytelling, and I used to tell it to the cameraman, which was always my job, was to try to make him crack up and not move the camera. I was terrible. I have so much fun doing it. So when we had to go on to virtual, I used some of the same techniques. Now, if we're doing something where, like on Zoom, I'm seeing them, even when they're on mute, I'm looking at those reactions. I'm still getting that feedback. But when I had to do it for film or television or virtual, when there is no feedback on it, we use our creativities. We use our imaginations. I'm sure, Jerry, you do the same thing. We're picturing, even though I may not be able to feel or hear or see the reactions, I'm now then called upon to make them my own imagination of them.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sorry, Bob, because we have to give that visual of time and space and day, night, stars twinkling, etc., to really enhance the moment, even if it's vocally or not saying a word at all. it gives the audience a
Power of
chance.
the pause.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Power of
Yes.
the pause.
Which,
You guys are doing awesome. I don't need to speak at all during this whole thing. I'm just gonna let you two keep on running. Uh, um, what kind of help did you wish you, looking back on it, and Carrie, so you touched a little bit about this, from where you learned it from, but what kind of help would you have wanted now that you know better to get started in storytelling, maybe as a more professional type of thing? What are the lessons that you had to accidentally stumble yourself into to figure out how to do this? Or was it just you just started telling stories when you were in school and it just kept on rolling for you?
Um, I'll take that one to start, Chair, if you don't mind. I remember when I
that's fine.
decided that I wanted to be a professional. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was in college. It was my first year of college. I was studying in Mexico. I wanted to learn Spanish. I did not grow up speaking Spanish. Now it's been most of my life. I've the last almost 50 years. I can't even imagine thinking it in one language. And I'm now adding other languages or trying to. A bissel of Yiddish and some of that, a little bit of Yiddish. Um, but I remember being a freshman in college and walking across campus in Cholula, Puebla, Mexico, and looking out at the mountains. And I had just been talking with some people who had read a lot of the folk and fairy tales that I grew up with. They had never heard them. And I remember being shaken to my core. I don't know why it shook me so much, but I can still see it. I still remember how it felt going, oh, you poor deprived things. What do you mean you've never heard a story? Because the experience is very different. And I love reading. I will be honest. I've always been a bookworm. And I probably always will be. But for me, one of the reasons I love to read is because I could hear the stories in my mind when I was reading them to myself. Is because I heard the oral art form. I grew up surrounded by it with at home, my family, and luckily my teachers in school and in the neighborhood. So I knew, oh, I know what I want to do is I'm going to become a professional storyteller. This is 1974, 1975 school year, and I was living in a different country. I had never actually heard of a professional storyteller when I got the idea, and they didn't know what to make of me at school. I wish I had known some of the things that I do now about how I could make it into a career, but I obviously figured it out. I just had to figure out, and then I ended up having to do it because I was then living in Mexico, how to do it in a second language. But I would have liked to know, and there are now courses on how to do it. There are now more support. There's the National Storytelling Network. There's local and regional guilds. We have here in Florida, we have the Florida Storytelling Association. In Atlanta, actually, there's a wonderful storytelling group. I visited there. So we now have some of that support. I wish I had had that when I first started, but it doesn't mean that you can't create it. I mean, that was part of it. I had this vision. I knew what I wanted to do. It wasn't going to go through school because they didn't have any classes at the time. And I had to figure it out on my own. But there's two things that are really good. When you're pioneering in any field, the good part is there's nobody to tell you you're doing it all wrong. Now, the downside to it is there's nobody to tell you you're doing it all wrong.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. That in the beginning, when I said I want to become a storyteller, you think, okay, you saw someone who would tell stories more than you did. You're beginning. Now, is that the template you want to use? But then you say, well, I think I want to add this, that, and other, i.e., the Spanish.
And I had never actually heard somebody do that before, but it was the way I was going to have to do it because of where I was living and what was going on.
You guys may have just lost me because Atlanta, a storm just went through.
We hear you. We can hear
you,
you, Jerry. Just your camera died on you for a moment.
Okay.
We can hear you. Keep on going.
Lost power, but I can hear you guys fine.
Oh, keep on going because I'm interested in what were the things that you wish you had known? Because you said you went from acting. There's a lot of those skills.
Yeah, because as an actor, you're always like I said, like I said, sometimes it's like monologues. Storytelling is monologues, but you don't think of that as being a storyteller as being doing a monologue that's set inside of a play. It takes on the whole life of having a whole cast as well. So you have to mix those two in together. But you don't know that. That's not taught to you. You have to find it in yourself, or realize that, you know what, I'm just going to put my foot out there and go for it, because this is the story that I want to tell. This is the language I want to put in there. This is the animal sounds I want to put there, and this is the interpretation that I want to give. And then you just want to have to go with it. So once again, there's that whole thing, like, everyone has a story to tell, and everybody wants a story to tell. If you're in a conversation, just go with it. And then you're going to try to take it like clay and mold it, so whereby every time you step out there to tell a story, you feel really good and comfortable, and you're enjoying every moment of it.
Now, I got a question for you, Jerry. How much of a perfectionist are you on the animal sounds versus you making them versus playing an audio clip of an actual animal?
Playing with is important. You know the animal sound, but that animal still has a personality. Or the plants. Plants have a personality. So anything has a personality. So you find, okay, what the subtext of that plant, animal, or thing, and make it yourself. That way it becomes more believable.
So you don't have a soundboard that you're sitting there and press the lion button, press the bird button?
No, and Google it. Wikipedia. No, that's good research, but is it really fun?
Oh, I hear you on that one. I hear you on that one.
And he just said something so important to me, is the word play. We have to play with it. I really do believe that we don't play enough in this world. I mean, where did we lose it? As kids, we did this naturally, how we learned everything through play. When did we stop? So it's not
We don't.
late.
We don't. We don't. That is the when you see my emails, that is the signature line on my emails. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing.
I agreed 110%.
Right.
And I plan to keep on playing every day if I can.
Right. Exactly.
For those of us who might have started watching the feed late, Jerry is still with us. Just his camera died on him because the power outage in the location where he is, but we still have him on here on the phone, being able to contribute. And I appreciate you sticking through. This leads me to my next question for you, Jerry and Carrie Sue.
Okay.
What is the crazy thing that has happened during a performance for you that you've had to try and overcome like this?
Oh, well, I've performed, and Carrie, you probably performed out at parks. There's been storms.
Yeah.
And if there's not a pavilion, and if there's a pavilion, you get underneath the pavilion, and then, like in Georgia, the weather here in Georgia, if you don't like it now, wait a few minutes. It'll change. Like
It's
right
the same
now,
in
this
Florida.
And then
Just give it 15 minutes. That's right.
Yeah, and then you can add that moment within the story, because everybody's right there with you. They know what happens, and they're probably almost anticipating, see if you're going to just say, oh, woe is me. No, add it to it.
And
to it.
everybody laughs because
Exactly.
they're getting it, that connection. And we were talking earlier, it's always about connections. They're connecting with some part of the story and with each other as we're sharing our stories. And yeah, we're laughing about it because as you're talking about that storm, or a train that goes by, or a siren, or a snake that comes up on stage, that's happened too. You never know what might happen, and they're all present in that moment too. So when you bring it in, and it can be just an aside, or it can become part of the story, everybody enjoys that. And it's
Right.
part of being
And
live, and like Jerry was saying too, of being present in that moment.
yeah, and they'll appreciate, because it's almost like a child. I'll tell you, you've probably been with children, and they'll sit there with their arms crossed. Okay, show me what you got.
And adults.
Right. And adults as well, right?
So that leads me to a good question of what do you two think society thinks about storytelling as in the concept that you do it? Because it's really easy for us who are creative people to say, oh, well, no, of course you're going to be playing. Of course you're going to do these things. But what do you think society is overall gets wrong about being a storyteller versus, or just how they think about this whole concept?
Well, I think that sometimes people think that it's just for kids, and I think it's for everyone. Unless you're in the business world, then they know the best story wins. We can see that in our business, we can see that in politics, we can see that in so many different things. It is who is telling the story, how they're telling the story, and as Jerry said earlier, why it's important for all of us to share our stories because there's real power in storytelling. And I think that's also some of the fear of it because they can dismiss it and say, "Oh, that's just something for little kids." Then they can take that power away. But the truth of the matter is we know it's for all of us, for every age. There's a power in everyone telling their story, whether it's a folk tale, which I happen to love, because you'll find real truths in folk tales. It's just couched in a very comfortable outfit. Or moth storytelling, which is telling real life stories, or storytelling for a purpose, whether it's healthcare or education or business.
Right. Because even with as like for adults, we all know, you all know about TED Talk, right? Well, TED Talk has become that storytelling for adults.
Mm-hmm.
So it's given storytelling a little bit more, not necessarily credibility, but ability to be believed as yes. You know what? This is a thing that can be done and should be kept alive. Toastmasters, TED Talk, Toastmasters, the same thing. Speakers Guild. But as
Carrie, I want to. Carrie brought up her traditions there, and I want to hear from you, Jerry, too, because I know you come out of that African folk tradition. Tell us more about where that built up for you, that.
Okay. Right, like I said, because I'm Charleston. I live in Atlanta now, but Charleston, South Carolina's home. But my father was in Air Force, so I'm an Air Force brat. So I was born in Texas. The G stands for Gomez. We were stationed in Denver, Colorado, San Bernardino, California. I've lived in New York. So I have not a worldwide appreciation for different cultures, et cetera, but I have a appreciation for different people and different things and different experiences. And I think that has helped me in being able to be confident in telling the story. Because like I said, in my book, I've used the language twee, because like I said, when as a percussionist, I used to live in an area in Atlanta that's quite diverse. I don't know if you ever heard of Clarkston, Georgia. I mean, culturally, the whole world lives there. And some of the guys would say, "Wow, you play the djembe different." I said, "Well, this is what I do. I was raised taking the drumsticks and playing it with the drumsticks. So what I do, I've just taken the drumsticks out of my hand and play with my spirit. And that's where I get my rhythm from." So the same thing. Wherever you're from, you'll have a different cultural and a different spiritual reason for how you tell a story. And because, Carrie, you were talking about Cuba, Mexico, etc., you add a little bit of that flavor to your story.
Exactly, el sabor, that flavor, and our experiences add to all of our flavors. And it's interesting, especially if you were a military brat, you get to travel, see so many different ones. I wasn't, so my dad was Navy, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, in Squirrel Hill. Yes, I really was Mr. Rogers' neighbor, lived in his neighborhood. He really was my neighbor. He actually lived a few houses down when I was growing up. And he
Oh, wow.
taught me something about storytelling because one of the things I remember about him is even as a kid, he would get down on eye level and look you right in the eye. And there weren't that many adults. I actually had some in my family that did that, but outside there weren't that many. He was a great listener to it. And I think because it was also a university town, I mean, in my neighborhood, we just had a little bit of everything. And because I was close to the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University and Duquesne University and so many of them, we got to meet people from all over, share foods and stories. But it's like Einstein, who was such a brilliant scientist. I mean, we know he was an amazing scientist, but more and more I realized just how brilliant he was. When he was asked how to become a great scientist, his answer was read fairy tales. And when somebody
Right.
else asked, well, what else can you do? He said, read more fairy tales, because he knew nothing can be created until it's first imagined. Knowledge
Right.
is, I mean, is one thing, and this is long before Google. He knew imagination was more important than knowledge. We can look everything up on the internet in one format or another, but what do we do with that information? And stories
Right.
can help put it
Exactly.
together for all of us in our own way, in our own language, our own rhythms.
Right.
Jerry,
Exactly. Yeah.
my question for you, Jerry, that I want to get your feedback on is equipment. Because we're all doing this right now, online, etc. But you both really do this in person. But what kind of equipment? I mean, obviously, I'm going to guess voice is really the key thing that you need. But tell us, what kind of external equipment do you need to be a good storyteller?
Oh, I mean, everyone. That's funny. Funny. Whenever you go out, a lot of places will ask you what you need, and I try to be self-contained. So I have these. I have 3 speakers, 2 speakers for music, another speaker where I have my microphone, just in case. And I always have a 50-foot extension cord and a power surge, just in case something happens with that location you're at. And so you have a microphone is happy. You can either have a wireless mic, or a mic with a headphone mic, or a handheld mic and a cable. And there's, like I said, the speakers, $50. So, there's a little cost to it. But as you grow and expand, and I'd always like to have my own things available with me so I can always have at least some control on the moment at that moment. And then the storytelling will be fine in and of itself, as compared to having to worry about equipment.
I agree. We need to be heard. It's more important to be able to be heard than to even be seen. And by the way, this is a perfect example, because Jerry, we can hear you clearly, even if we don't see you at this moment. And for storytelling, that's really key. They need to be able to hear us, to hear all the inflections. So if it's a small place, I may not even need a mic. But I'm like Jerry, I like to bring some of my own just in case. I have a small battery operated one. We were talking about doing things outside in parks sometimes, and oh wait, there's no electricity. So I have some of that. Or if we plug in, I do also like to carry if I'm doing a handheld mic, I like to have a mic stand. People don't always have it, so I have one with me. Or if it's a wireless mic, it all depends on where you are. But the most important thing is to be heard, whether we're doing it virtually through the computer or we're doing it first in person, face to face.
Right. Yeah. Neither Carrie and I work for this company, but I guarantee you that it's become our best friends. Amazon.
That's actually true, isn't it? Especially as we went from live to virtual, because
Yeah.
we might have had, like I had the mics and the speakers just like Jerry, and then all of a sudden, wait, I need to have a different camera for my computer. It doesn't work that same way. Or different microphone for it, or different lights. Thank you, Amazon, when everything else shut down. I have to tell you, there was one other thing that I have noticed that we really need when it comes to equipment, and that's water. Water to be able to drink, because our instrument is often our voices, our bodies. Yeah, really important. Thank you very much. Salud. Because without water, and that has happened to me, where you're traveling and there's not always a place to get water, and they figure, oh, when we went to Cuba, there were days I didn't have enough water. Lots of beer, ironically. Wonderful people, living in some very difficult times, I have to say. That part was hard, but the people and the stories and the music, it was it was phenomenal. I loved all the people and the places where I got to tell stories. But one of the only things that I had a hard time with is sometimes I didn't have enough regular water to drink. And that's hard to do. That's our instrument too, our voices.
Yeah. So you always have a little ice, a little sandwich bag or whatever to have water available.
Yeah, and when you're traveling,
idea.
you have to make sure you sometimes have access to it. When we're driving, it's not hard because we always can put it in our car. And there's parts where I can't drink the water, not just in Mexico, I just came back from, but even here in Florida, in my home state now, there's parts where I can't drink tap water. It just doesn't agree with me. So I always make sure I have to have water with me wherever it is. But when we're flying, it's a little trickier. So I remember going out west one time for a week of storytelling and saying, I'll need a small case of water at the hotel. And they thought I was exaggerating when I said a case. And they went, oh, after the first day of telling stories all day in schools, they went, oh, you weren't kidding. I went, no, I'm not.
Need. Yeah. That is awesome. That is definitely something I tend to think about water a lot because of just pure health, stay healthy, drink, X amount of ounces of water a day. Half your body weight in ounces a day in water. That's what everybody out there should be drinking. Tell me, Jerry, you have this really great, you've got your book going on, you've got all these other things. What would you tell someone, or how would you tell somebody whether they're successful in storytelling or not, whether it's a career or not? Like, how do you know you're a successful storyteller, even if you're not going to be having a TED Talk, having a Toastmaster thing, you're going to get a book published on what, like you guys are both very professional, very successful people. But how does somebody get a feel for whether they're a storyteller or not without that level of professionalism?
Well, I'll take it to, I started just recently, because I think you were talking about the summer library theme. This summer was Oceans of Possibilities.
Yep, yeah, we did that, yeah.
Right, so I was at a library, and I always tend to clean up, move the tables back to where they were, etc. So the children's librarian said, I know what you're thinking, but I always clean up before I go. And you know what she said to me? She said, you tell good stories. That's when you're going to come back. So the thing is, just believe in yourself, and then you will become successful. And then when you talk about what external things you need, and Carrie, I don't know about you, but you learn to become a great marketing executive, have you not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I discovered was, and it took me until only a couple of years ago, because I'm not really good in what we consider the traditional marketing. I will be honest, that's not my strength. I have other strengths. What I am good is telling stories. And that's been and being me, that's been my best marketing tool, because I'm doing it always, whether I'm thinking about that as a marketing tool or not. And when I finally realized that, which is only a couple of years ago, it was my big aha moment. So I may not be good at doing email lists or sending things out, but I'm good at telling stories and connecting with people. And Jerry just said it, if you tell good stories and you make that connections, whether you're at the library or at a park or wherever you might be telling it, or a museum or a big stage, they're gonna want you to come back, especially if you are professional. And like Jerry just said, clean up after yourself. Do those very nice things. Treat others like you want to be treated. That golden rule. It really does make a difference. But I remember, and it was actually a librarian who told me this years ago. One of the things is, I was told, I've told this by several people, I get hired because I do what I say I'm going to do. I actually deliver the goods. What a concept. I thought, of course. And I show up when I'm supposed to show up. That's the professionalism. And I thought, well, that kind of goes without saying, but apparently not always. Have you heard the same thing, Jerry?
No, yes, yeah. And because when you ask or give an opportunity to email the library just 2 days ahead of time and say, looking forward to performing with your patrons, do that. Don't let them have to guess that you're coming. Let them know that you're looking forward to being there. And that puts everybody at ease, because at the libraries or wherever they're at, they have other responsibilities as well. It's fortunate that we're able to go there as professionals to perform with their patrons, but always be respectful of their time as well.
I agree. And the other thing that does when you when email is instantaneous, it's very easy to do a paper trail that way. Then you can put things down clearly. It's like when you write out a contract, just put what's so it's clear, you know, when you're supposed to start, when you're supposed to be there, what the address is, all those little details, but it's clear that we're so both sides know what to expect with it. Then you can surprise them with the story. I mean, that's part of it.
Exactly. And Carrie, I don't know if you experienced this year in Georgia, it was we had election days too as well. So not all the time will you be in the meeting room. You might be directly in the children's library area. So be able to be adaptable. Be adaptable.
I think that's a really key point, not just on election years like this, but that's certainly part of it. But always be adaptable, because we don't always have control over it, and the venues who are hiring us don't always have control over it too. So don't sweat the small stuff sometimes too. And I think when it comes to success, you have to decide for yourself what your success is too. Is it doing what we love, what we're passionate about, making a difference, leaving the world a little bit better than maybe what we found it? That might be part of it. That certainly for me is part of my success or view of it. Or is it making enough money or making enough fame? Decide what it is for you, but that's something that you have to live with. Fame is not it for me, because I'm famous in my own family or amongst the people who know me. But of course, those that don't know you at all. But I learned early on, my grandmother was a singer, and she had a lot of very well-known famous friends. But what I remember from them wasn't because they were famous. I mean, Pearl Bailey and my grandmother were like sisters. Ooh, there were stories there in the 50s. But
Yeah.
there were. They'd go out for trouble because everything was still segregated. And my grandmother is a short, white, Jewish blonde, and you know, and with Pearl Bailey, who was like her other sister. And then they'd go after the shows. There wasn't every place that they could go to. So there were lots of interesting stories about that. They were both troublemakers too, but it was fun. Or Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra wanted to take me home. He thought I was cute, by the way. Of course, I was only 4 at the time. He was my grandmother's friend. So, I mean, or Liberace, my impression of him was not a great pianist. I remember him sitting on the floor playing with us and then drawing on a little, he gave us a little grand piano, Baby Sky Blue, and he drew his signature on it in a black Sharpie. And what I remember was I was so impressed with him, not because he could play piano, but because he could draw. He drew the candelabra, which was part of his signature. And I was so impressed. I was a kid of what, maybe 3 or 4. But what I learned from them was fame was one thing, but as a kid, it meant nothing to me. How did they treat me? How did they look at me or listen to me? That's my grandmother said she knew a lot of very well-known people, but what kind of person were they? That was much more important. And so to me, that's what success really is. What kind of person do you want to be? And as a story, we get to be all the characters.
Right. Yeah, because like I said, success is not necessarily the reaction that you get, but if you do you always have to do the best that you can and always control what you can, and then success will happen based on that.
So tell me so for people who are out there, I mean, TikTok, as an example, is a modern storytelling platform that people get out there and you're doing something you can do. Are either of you doing TikTok or Instagram video type stuff?
Instagram, but I haven't gone to TikTok yet. I don't know about you, Carrie.
I haven't done even Instagram. I don't even have, I finally got on Facebook, and that was good only because somebody said to me, you need to put out so people know where you're going to be. They can check in on it. But no, I haven't. That for me, part of my success was I just wanted to be able to make somewhat of a living. And then I've been lucky to do that. But it was by doing what Jerry just said, doing what we do as best as I possibly can. Always trying to do a good job, no matter what it was, whatever the connection would be. And that left me satisfied in that moment. And it's built up over the years because then you get a reputation. And that's how you build it. I don't know that it happens overnight. I mean, it might be TikTok, but will it last for 20 years or 40 years later?
There we go.
Yeah, but off of the social media aspect of it, does help, website, Instagram, YouTube, but it becomes work. So you always have to find that moment where you say, okay, this side of my brain has to do this type of work, and they say, it's over. Okay, now I can bark like a dog and cluck like a chicken.
And unfortunately, as artists, we're often called also to do the business part of it as well. Very few of us ever have somebody who can take over that part. There are a few, if they're lucky, but most of us have to do it all ourselves. So I really like Elizabeth Ellis, who was such a fabulous storyteller. Her idea is she gets to do me, myself, and I, and they all take on different parts. She'll talk to her business partner. It's really herself. So it's like Jerry said, a different part of your brain sometimes. If we're lucky, then we have somebody else who do that part, but usually we're doing all of it.
The ultimate small business. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
So Jerry, I want you to brag for me. I want you to tell me, what is the best experience you feel most proud of? What is it that you've done in storytelling where you walked away and you were like, I nailed it. You knew this was the right thing.
Funny you should mention that. Just this Saturday, I was able to perform at the Aurora Theater, which is in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And of course, all theaters are just coming back, getting in person, getting families to come back. So the marketing director said, just want to let you know that, we're getting our subscribers back. Just want to let you know. I said, hey, once again, if there's one family here, one child, I'm good. The first show was minimal, but the second show was fantastic. When I get parents, adults, and dads, and grandparents, and kids who want to come up on stage to tell the story along with me, then I say, you know what? Today was a good day. So I will say Saturday, August 27th, 2022. If you want me to brag, I nailed it.
That is, you go for it. Yes, that is awesome. How about you, Carrie?
Too many to count, but not too many to remember. I've been doing this a long time, so I've been really lucky. It's those moments when you go, yeah, we connected, we did it, we nailed it. We have them telling their own stories. For me, I'm also a teaching artist, which is my other passion, where I get to share storytelling in a different format. And I've had kids who were nonverbal who spoke for the first time. I had a kid who was severely depressed and found his own voice, and I didn't know about it for 2 years until he told me, because his brother had been murdered, and his first day back at school, he remembered me telling a story. He remembered a story that has never been published that I could find. That was the version I tell was from my father-in-law. It's my inheritance from my father-in-law. But he remembered that story of empowerment and of knowing what you have inside. And he said he could see like a light coming through the tunnel. I didn't know that for 2 years, but when I found that out, that was one of those moments. And it was 2 years after the fact, but I knew I had made those connections. There's so many of them when we go, yes, that came out because of that connection with the audience in that moment. So too many to count, but not too many to remember. I put them in what I call my heart pocket, and it's like my little envelope, my imaginary envelope. So when we all have those days and we all have them going, why did I think I could do this? I wanted to do this again. I just pull out one of those little imaginary envelopes of those moments, of those golden moments, like Jerry had on Saturday. And you go, oh yeah, that's why I like doing it.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
I want to make sure. Do you keep going, Jerry?
Oh, because I was going to say that, and Carrie will probably agree, that we're always looking for, we're in the moment of that day, but we're always looking for that next person that we can touch, and the next that we can create. We're all, like I said, if it's 24/7, that's what we want to do. Is always be able to touch somebody, especially when you get down to kids with special needs, et cetera, and their parents will tell you, and Carrie, you will agree, wow, they've never done that. I've never seen my child react like this. Then you just smile and say, hey, you don't necessarily, mom or dad, you don't necessarily have to bark like a chicken and cluck like a dog, but don't let anybody tell you about your child. You just understand your child. If we could become a quote-unquote teaching artist, to help you in that moment, thank you. We appreciate it. Because that's the same thing, like when we go to schools, and Terry, I don't know if you agree, that we always sometimes, we're not teachers, we're teaching artists. We're just trying to help teachers, give them a different way to perhaps think about how to teach something. That's our chance. That's our
See, no one's ever going to believe me that you two never met before today.
Never met him, but now I've so enjoyed talking with you. We're going, oh, that's exactly how I feel about it. It's what we call those golden moments. And as teaching artists, if we can help the teachers, because every time we might meet, reach those children in the classroom, those 30 or 40 or whatever it might be, or in a school, but those teachers are going to be teaching hundreds and thousands more. So if we can give them those tools, it's even more impactful. It reminds me of my mother, who was always an educator too. Her first career was as a speech pathologist, and helped form what became United Cerebral Palsy. And I remember Nina Eaton, who was the founder of United Cerebral Palsy, told me, first of all, my mother was the only professional when they first started. But when she looked at her son, who they had wanted to institutionalize, my mother examined him and said, there's a child inside there. What we need to do is to teach him how to communicate. But I guarantee you, there's somebody in there. There's a child inside there. By the way, I just want to let you know that her son, Leonard Eaton, he became the first federal judge with cerebral palsy. There was definitely
That's very nice.
Brilliant child inside there.
Yeah.
But that's all of it when we meet them. Right, Jerry? Don't you think? We never know what those stories are going to be, but if we can give them the power to then share their own stories, it's magic.
Yeah.
So you guys have both had some amazing success stories. Thank you very much for this. This hour just flew right on by. I got to let you both go because I know you both have commitments for here. But thank you both, Jerry. I've been sharing up your website for you when your camera went down, so people could see your face as you were talking.
Oh, yeah.
And Carrie Sue, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, the storm is bad here. The storm is bad, so I've been trying to get back in, but it's thunder and lightning. So
Well, just stay
you
safe.
did
I'm so
great,
glad to
Jerry.
have met you, even if it was via phone and video for a little bit.
I think this was a perfect example of what you were both talking about being flexible and being able to adjust to the circumstances and all that other stuff. You guys have done great. Let me throw up both of your contact information will be there on the recording for people to be able to grab you if they want to. Let me throw up our final slide here to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for being here today, for watching us today with our storytelling. Tune in next month. We're going to be talking about science fairs and how to do well on a science fair. You guys have a great week and a great month. We'll see you soon.
all right, thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Bye, Carrie. Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Bye, Jerry. Bye.